I threw my mother a surprise anniversary party, only for her to get drunk and announce her greatest regret was marrying my father. So I paid the bill, walked out, and haven't spoken to her since. My parents met in their late teens, two kids from opposite sides of a Rust Belt city. My father, David, was quiet and steady, an apprentice electrician with grease perpetually under his fingernails. My mother, Evelyn, was a whirlwind of dyed red hair and big dreams of being a singer. Against everyone's advice, they married at 21, a month after she found out she was pregnant with me. The first few years, as she'd tell it, were a fairy tale. He worked overtime. She stayed home with me, and they'd spend weekends at cheap diners, planning their future. But the music career never happened. Demos were rejected. Gigs were scarce and poorly paid, and resentment began to simmer beneath the surface of their youthful passion. I was 4 when the fighting started in earnest. My earliest memories are not of lullabies, but screaming matches that shook the thin walls of our apartment. My mother's voice was a piercing instrument, honed for a stage she never reached. "A boring life with a boring man," she'd shriek. My father's retorts were lower, grimmer, like thunder after lightning. "Someone has to pay the bills. Evelyn, your dreams don't keep the lights on." I learned to be small, to be silent. I'd hide in my closet, cover my ears with my hands, trying to block out the symphony of their discontent. I was a living, breathing symbol of the responsibility that had clipped her wings. She never said it directly, not then, but it was in her sighs when she looked at me, in the way she'd push my small hands away when I tried to hug her while she was staring out the window. When I was 7, my father got a better job, and we moved to a small house in a nearby suburb. The change of scenery didn't change the script. The fights just had more space to echo. My mother took a part-time job at a department store, hating every minute of it. She started going out with friends from her old life, other women who talked and might have beans. She'd come home late, smelling of cigarette smoke and cheap wine, and the fights would escalate. My father's love was quiet, expressed in packed lunches, and impatiently helping me with my homework after a 10-hour shift, in the way he'd quietly make her coffee in the morning after a brutal fight, a silent olive branch she would often ignore. Her love was a performance, bursts of intense affection when she was in a good mood, buying me extravagant gifts we couldn't afford, singing me to sleep with dramatic flair, only to be followed by days of cold detachment. I became a translator, a buffer. "Dad, Mom doesn't like it when you leave your tools on the kitchen table." "Mom, Dad worked a double. Maybe we could order pizza?" I felt like the shaky pillar, holding up a crumbling roof. I was a child carrying the weight of a marriage that had died years before I could understand what death meant. The physical fight started when I was 10. A slammed door, a shoved chair, a glass thrown against the wall. One night, it was a plate. It shattered near my feet as I stood crying in the hallway. The sound finally shocked them into a temporary truce. My father held me while my mother locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing. No one called the police. It was our dirty secret. They finally divorced when I was 13. It was less a dramatic explosion and more a slow, sad deflation. My mother moved into a downtown apartment, chasing the vibrant city life she felt she'd missed. My father stayed in the house. I split my time between them, and it was like living in 2 different countries with opposing climates. At my father's, it was calm, predictable, sometimes lonely. We'd eat simple meals, watch TV, and he'd ask about my day. His grief was a quiet, heavy blanket. At my mother's, it was chaotic and emotionally volatile. Her apartment was always a mess, filled with incense and the sound of old records. She'd have new friends over, artists and musicians who seemed fascinating and unstable. Sometimes she'd be wonderfully attentive, cooking elaborate meals and asking me about boys. Other times, She'd forget to pick me up from school or would be hung over and tearful, telling me how empty her life was. She started dating quickly, a musician named Rick who had a tattoo sleeve and a motorcycle, a failed actor named Paul who was always between projects. She'd morphed to match each one, changing her style, her opinions. With Rick, she wore leather and talked about road trips. With Paul, she wore black and quoted obscure plays. I was an awkward accessory in these performances, introduced as my brilliant daughter, then largely ignored. Throughout high school, I watched my mother play house with other people's families. She'd date men with children and become, for a few months, the cool stepmom. She'd bake cookies for their soccer team, post pictures with them on social media, gush about how wonderful it was to have a full house. Meanwhile, she'd often forget to attend my parent-teacher conferences or my school plays. If I pointed out the disparity, her face would crumple. You're my own flesh and blood. You don't need me to perform. They're fragile. They need the extra love. It was a logic that left me perpetually wounded. My father, on the other hand, never seriously dated. He'd go out occasionally, but his heart wasn't in it. His world was his job, and me. He was my rock. He saved meticulously so I could go to college, something my mother scoffed at. Life is for living, not for burying yourself in books and debt, she'd say. I took her advice in the worst way. At 18, desperate to escape the tension, I fell in with a fast crowd at the local community college I attended. I started partying, skipping classes. My father worried quietly. My mother, when she found out, was almost delighted. That's my girl, finally living a little. It was the final straw for my dad. He sat me down, his eyes weary. Don't throw your future away trying to run from your past, or to please her. It was the closest he'd ever come to criticizing her to me. It was a wake-up call. I transferred to a university 4 states away. The distance was a relief. I rebuilt myself, studying psychology, trying to understand the chaos I'd come from. My father visited when he could. My mother's visits were sporadic, dramatic events. She'd sweep in, take me to expensive dinners, dissect my life, and then leave in a cloud of perfume and unsolicited advice. During my junior year, she met Robert. He was different, older, wealthy, a divorced financier with a settled, luxurious life. He lived in a penthouse overlooking the river. He was calm, authoritative. To my shock, my mother settled. She moved in with him. She stopped dyeing her hair, letting the gray show. She traded her eclectic wardrobe for tailored linen and cashmere. She became Evie, a sophisticated hostess. Robert had 2 grown sons, Ben and Adam, who were polite but distant. My mother, however, threw herself into winning them over. She remembered their birthdays, sent lavish gifts to their children, and praised their careers endlessly. I became a footnote. Our phone calls grew shorter. When I'd visit, the conversations were all about Robert's golf game, the charity gala they'd attended, how brilliant Ben's youngest was at toddler gymnastics. She'd look at me, with my genes and my psychology textbooks, with a kind of benign puzzlement, as if wondering how the serious, quiet young woman could have come from her. The final twist of the knife came at my college graduation. My father was there, beaming, his camera clicking constantly. My mother arrived late with Robert, both dressed as if for a cocktail party rather than a sunny campus ceremony. Afterward, at dinner, she held court. Robert's son Ben, he graduated summa cum laude from Yale Law, she said to the table at large. We're so proud. It's just wonderful to be part of such an accomplished family. She didn't mention my honors, my hard-won degree. I saw my father's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. That night, in my tiny apartment, I finally broke down in front of him. Why am I never enough for her? I sobbed. He held me, his own eyes glistening. It's not you, kiddo. It never was. Some people are just broken in a way that makes them look for mirrors, not windows. They only see their own reflection in others. You and I, we were never good mirrors for what you want to see. His words were a painful key that unlocked a lifetime of confusion. I began to pull back, protecting myself. I got a good job in my university city. Built a life with my kind-hearted boyfriend, James. My mother's role in it became smaller, curated to short, superficial visits. Then, Robert died suddenly of a heart attack 2 years ago. My mother was, for the first time I'd ever seen, truly shattered. Not just sad, but utterly lost. The identity she'd built, Evie, the wealthy financier's wife, vanished overnight. Robert's sons were courteous but clear. The penthouse was sold, the assets distributed. She received a generous settlement, but her status was gone. She moved back to our hometown, into a sleek condo. She was adrift. She started calling me more, not with drama, but with a hollow neediness. She wanted to reminisce about my childhood, but her memories were rosy, fictionalized tales of perfect mother-daughter moments that never happened. I played along out of a confused sense of pity. Last month, she turned 60, the big 6-0. She was melancholy about it. I'm an old woman with nothing to show for it, she'd sigh on the phone. A dangerous, hopeful part of me stirred. Maybe now, stripped of the performances, we could have something real. James cautioned me gently. Manage your expectations, love. But I didn't listen. I decided to throw her a surprise party. Not a huge one, but an elegant dinner at the Oak Room, the nicest restaurant in our hometown. I invited a few of her older, more stable friends, my father, who agreed to come for my sake, James, and, after much deliberation, Ben and Adam, Robert's sons. To my surprise, they accepted. I thought it would be a grand, healing gesture, a celebration of her, connecting her past and her more recent life. I was nervous the day of. I'd arranged everything. The private room, the bouquet of her favorite lilies, the cake. James and I arrived early. My father came next, giving me a tight hug. "This is a good thing you're doing," he said, though his eyes were wary. My mother arrived with Ben and Adam. She was beautifully dressed, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the room. When everyone shouted surprise, her hand flew to her chest. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound. She embraced her friends, was politely affectionate with Ben and Adam, gave my father a stiff nod, and kissed my cheek. "You shouldn't have, darling," she said, but she was pleased. For the first hour, it was perfect. She was a gracious, charming center of attention, holding court, telling witty stories. Then the wine started flowing, and flowing. My mother had always held her liquor poorly, and tonight was no exception. Her laughter grew louder, her stories more theatrical and less coherent. She began draping herself over Ben and Adam, calling them my wonderful bonus sons. She ignored my father completely. I tried to gently steer her towards water, but she brushed me off. As the main course was cleared, she stood up, clinking her glass forcefully. "A toast to me," she declared with a sloppy grin. People chuckled awkwardly. To 60 years of living out loud. She took a gulp. And to learning that sometimes you have to close the wrong doors to find the right room. She looked directly at my father, her expression turning sharp, all pretended warmth gone. I finally found my right room with Robert, a real man, a provider, a somebody. The table fell silent. My father looked down at his hands. "Marrying you, David," she continued, her voice dripping with a decades-old bitterness, "was the single biggest mistake of my life. A dead-end job, a dead-end town, a quiet life. She spat the word quiet like an insult. My blood ran cold. James put a hand on my arm. Ben and Adam looked intensely uncomfortable. She wasn't finished. She swayed, turning her glass toward me, and getting stuck because of, well, she waved her hand vaguely in my direction. That was the price, I suppose. The anchor that kept me in that wrong room for so long. She didn't say pregnancy or a child. She said that, and the anchor, there it was, the unvarnished truth, vomited up in a room full of people. I was not her daughter in that moment. I was her regret, her obstacle, the tangible proof of her mistake. Everything slowed down. I saw the pity on her friends' faces, the shock on Ben and Adam's, the profound sorrow on my father's. I felt a lifetime of bending, translating, making excuses, and seeking crumbs of affection snap. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I felt eerily calm. I stood up, my chair scraping softly in the dead quiet room. I looked at her, this drunken, miserable woman who gave birth to me. I walked over to the waiter standing stiffly by the door. Please bring me the check for everything consumed so far, and have a taxi call for Mrs. Evelyn Clark. I said, my voice clear and steady. You can't be serious, my mother slurred, laughing in disbelief. I'm not finished. This is my party. It was, I said, turning to face her. It's over now. I paid the substantial bill with my card. The taxi arrived. Ben, to his credit, gently took my mother's arm. Come on, Evelyn, let's get you home. She went, confused and starting to complain, her grand exit ruined. I turned to the remaining guests. I am so deeply sorry you had to witness that. Please, stay. Finish your drinks. Enjoy the cake. The evening is on me. I then looked at my father. His eyes were full of tears, but he gave me the smallest, proudest nod. James and I left. In the car, the delayed shock hit, and I trembled violently. He just held me, saying nothing. The fallout was swift. Text from her the next day, first confused, what got into you? Then angry, how dare you humiliate me like that? And finally venomous, you've always been his daughter, cold and judgmental. Robert's boys would never. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. Ben sent me a brief, apologetic email, which I appreciated but didn't engage with. That was 7 weeks ago. I have not heard from her since. The silence has been the most profound gift she has ever given me. I started therapy, something I should have done years ago. I'm learning that my value is not and never was tied to her ability to see it. I'm learning to grieve the mother I needed but never had, so I can fully appreciate the love I do have. From my steadfast father, from James, from the chosen family of friends I built, the cord is cut, not with rage, but with a final, sorrowful clarity. I threw her a party to celebrate her life, and she used it to finally, definitively show me my place in it, as a regrettable consequence. So, I have granted her wish. I have removed the anchor from her life. My only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. My life now is quiet. It is peaceful. It is mine. And I am learning, day by day, that there is no greater accomplishment than that.